Hi, I'm Anita Bozer, and for the Therapeutic Fitness Challenge today, we're going to do core exercises. One of the cornerstones of core exercises is stabilizing your pelvis. So a lot of core exercises involve moving body parts, but what's really working are the muscles we worked in core breathing, the pelvic floor and the transverse abdominis. And those muscles are stabilizing the pelvis. And a key to stabilizing the pelvis is finding your pelvic neutral. So let's do that first. Some people have a large arch to their low back. That's called an anterior pelvic tilt. I do that, and I call that duck butt. Some people flatten their low back, and I call that tuck butt. But what's really the best for the spine is to have a slight curve. Some people will have more curve than others. There's no one right curve. But go ahead and go back and forth a few times. So as you exhale, use your abdominal muscles to bring your pubic bone up towards your chin. And as you inhale, use the muscles in your low back to lift your tailbone towards the back of your head. So as you exhale, your low back settles into the floor. As you inhale, you roll your pelvis so your low back lifts off the floor. Go back and forth a few times and notice which way is easier for you. Some people find it much easier to go one way than another. And you want to find the spot that is somewhat in between, where you have a small curve in your low back. So go ahead, when you're here, take your hand and see, can you fit just a hand width under your low back? If you have too much of an arch, you want to bring it down a little bit. And if there's not enough room for your hand, you want to get a slight arch. Then hold on to the front bones of your pelvis here, because this is what you want to stabilize. You don't want your pelvis to move at all. You want it to stay completely right here. From here, I want you to stabilize your pelvis, but try to lift your right foot off the floor without tipping your pelvis or changing the curve of your low back. At first, just try to take some of the weight out of your foot, not lifting it all the way, and set it back down. And then try it with your left foot. So again, this pelvis is very stable, and you're lifting just a little bit. I lifted a little bit too much. If that's difficult for you, just try coming up on the toes. So just lift the heel of one foot and the other, making sure you can stabilize your pelvis. And if you can do that, try lifting the toes. Okay, so that's a modification. And when you have the strength, go ahead and lift one foot up. No movement in the pelvis whatsoever, not even a millimeter. And then the other one. So the legs are working, but what's really getting strengthened are the muscles around your pelvis, your core muscles. It might help when you're lifting one foot up to press the other foot down slightly into the floor. So if you're having trouble, you're rotating your pelvis, try pressing the other foot down as you lift the opposite foot up. So do a couple repetitions of that. You don't have to do 10. Do 3, 4, 5, 6, lifting. And if you can't lift the foot all the way up, again, just lift the heel and or the toes. So go ahead and tilt your pelvis again. Re-find your neutral. Notice if you shift it a little bit. So arch and flatten your back. Re-establish your neutral, and we'll go on to the second part of the sequence. So keeping your pelvis very stable, lift one foot up, and then see if you can lift the second foot up, keeping your pelvis neutral. Now some people actually find this easier than the first one, and it's called a toe tap. So keeping your pelvis completely steady, lower one leg down and bring it back. Only go as far as you can without shifting your pelvis. You don't want it to rotate or tip. And if you can come all the way to where your toe just barely touches, come down that far. If you rotate, stop and go back to the first exercise. So again, do 3 or 4 of these. If you want a little bit more challenge, you can even take the leg out. So that puts a little bit more leverage, a little bit more weight that your core has to stabilize against. But again, there's no sense doing it if your pelvis is tipping or rocking. Go back to what you can do stabilizing your pelvis, because that's the movement you want to strengthen. You don't want to strengthen any rotation or tipping in your pelvis. So the next part of the sequence is bridge. So again, arch and flatten, reestablish your neutral. And once your neutral is established, you want to bridge up. If you do a lot of yoga, you're used to bridging up by rolling your spine. As a core exercise, we want to keep the pelvis neutral. So check and see that your knees are in line with your hips. You don't want them in or out. You want them straight in line with your hips. Keep your pelvis neutral and press down into your feet, equally into the balls and heels, and lift your hips up without arching or flattening. So lift up. As you come back down, notice, do both sides hit the floor at the same time. That's good, because if you rotate, one side will hit first. And then lift, keeping a neutral pelvis, and lower with a neutral pelvis. As you come down, make sure you have just the same amount of small arch in your low back. Coming up and down 3 or 4 times. If you can do that easily, try the next part of the sequence. So lift up into bridge. Hold on to your pelvis to make sure it doesn't shift. This one's hard. And lift one foot. Settle down. And lift the other foot. But if you can't do that, just stay with bridging. But if you want to add, or you have a particularly strong day, go ahead and add the stepping, lifting a foot with your bridge pose. Next, we're going to do a different stabilization exercise. This is a little bit more challenging. Again, you want to start by finding your pelvic neutral. So arch your back and flatten your back, even round through your low back. And come halfway in between and notice, do you have a small curve in your low back? It might be helpful to ask somebody to see if you have a small curve. And then use the same muscles as before to stabilize. So your pelvis isn't going to rotate, you won't drop a hip or shift into an arch or flatten. And as you're here, go ahead and stabilize and see if you can lift one hand up. If it's difficult to lift one hand, just come up onto the fingertips. And then if you can do that, then lift the hand. So try that again, once each hand. Come up on the fingertips. If you can stabilize, lift the arm. When you bring the hand back, notice if you shift a lot. You might not notice when you do it, but if you shift when you come back, you know you didn't stabilize enough. And then come up on the fingers, and then lift. Good. And arch and flatten again to re-find your neutral. And then try it with the legs. So your arms are stabilizing, your abdominals are stabilizing, and if you can, lift a leg. You can straighten it, And bring it on down. And then try the other side. Notice one side might be easier than the other. That's because one side of your core is easier than the other. So again, try it where you lift a leg. And what you don't want to have happen is that you want to keep your pelvis stable. And then if you can, raise the opposite arm. And you can hold that for as long as you can hold it without destabilizing. And then try the other side. As soon as you feel your hip dropping, then go ahead and come back. Because again, you want to strengthen the stabilization. If you keep doing it when you rotate, you'll miss strengthening the strong core. A good core exercise that involves the whole body is plank. Now we can do plank on the floor, but we're going to do plank at the wall, just because it's a little bit safer. And if you find that plank at the wall is really easy for you, then you can do plank on the floor, on your knees. And if that's easy for you, then you can do full plank. But let me show you what it looks like at the wall. You want to have your hands right at your shoulder height. Want to have the feeling of your entire hand on the wall, the whole palm, all fingers, and have the sense that your palms are stuck to the wall, so you don't have to hold them up, and your shoulders and your elbows can drop away. That helps engage the core of your shoulder girdle, so that's important as well, not just the core of your abdomen. The other thing you want to do is tuck your chin in so that the back of your neck is long. Think of reaching the crown of your head away from your feet. That engages the core muscles of your neck. And then go ahead and step back in neutral. So don't arch, don't flatten. Keep your neutral here and lean into the wall. And you'll feel your core engage. So keep your chin tucked, your elbows dropping and tucked in towards your side to engage the core of your shoulders, and keep your pelvis neutral, drawing your belly button in towards your spine. You can even come farther away from the wall and think of being a plank, a flat board. It just depends on your body whether it feels better to have your elbows bent or your arms out straight. Feel what you feel in your core, what you've learned from the other exercises, and vary that based for your body. You might want to stand far away from the wall. Again, tucking your chin, keeping neutral in your pelvis, keeping your elbows drawing down. Or you might want to be closer and bend your elbows. Do what works best for you.